Hi, this is a video lecture for the chapter 1 in the Human Relations textbook. It's all about human relations and you, how you can benefit from knowing more about human relations. So, if we know about the nature and importance of human relations, it's going to help us to understand why we even want to do this course, right? So, what is human relations? It's the art of using systematic knowledge about human behavior to improve personal, job, and career effectiveness. So basically, if we know how people react to certain situations, what kind of behaviors they're going to show, we can use that knowledge to our benefit, either personally, so like in our personal relationships, or on the job. So this textbook mostly focuses about on the job stuff, since this is a career college, but a lot of that like personal and career knowledge is going to be transferable, right? Humans are humans, whether they're on the job or at home, right? So the human relations field is similar to the field of organizational behavior, but it is less technical and more applied. So we're looking at how can we actually use this knowledge and do something with it. So it is important, human relations, because it contributes to organizations, their productivity, and how it satisfies the demands of all, including employees, customers, and investors. So basically, if a company is using human relation knowledge to their benefit, they're going to be impressing customers, and they're also going to have employees that really like working there. Or the flip side, if they're not using it well, they're going to have customers that don't return and employees that have poor morale overall. So you guys might already have a bit of a clue about this, but work and personal life influence each other. We talk a lot about work-life balance, right? People want a career that allows them to still do the things that they love at home, to still be able to spend time with family and their children or their spouses. So we know that these two things are really, really intertwined, right? So number one, job satisfaction contributes to life satisfaction. Have you ever heard someone talking about working a soul-sucking job? If you're at work all day long and hate what you're doing and can't stand being around the people that you work with, that you take that energy home with you. And then you don't have the energy to do much else. You feel like garbage because you feel like the good majority of your day is spent hating your life, right? We're at work, generally, most people that work full-time are at work for 8 hours a day. Assuming you sleep for 8 hours a day, that only leaves 8 other hours for you to be around loved ones, do things that you want to do, pursue your hobbies, etc. Right? So if that job satisfaction, if it's poor and it leaks into the rest of your life, it's going to affect those other areas. So number 2, an unsatisfying job affects health. And I'm sure certainly seen that if you've heard of or known somebody, or maybe yourself has been affected, where they're on stress leave, or have some kind of like maybe a mental health break or something like that, where being at work is adversely affecting their health. So for instance, I have an example for you. My mother, she worked a job where she was a manager, and it was a pretty high stress job, and she has had high blood pressure all her life. She retired a couple years ago, and all of a sudden her blood pressure is like pretty normal. So that's proof right there that stress, unsatisfying job environments where you feel stress, is going to affect your health. If you guys remember when we talked about cortisol, cortisol is a hormone that's produced during times of stress, and cortisol affects every cell in our body, right? So if we are living a stressful situation, like an unsatisfying job or a really difficult high stress job, that's going to affect our health because our body's going to produce more cortisol to try to cope. So if we have good quality work relationships, it can lead to good quality personal relationships and vice versa. So having good personal relationships can lead to good work relationships as well. I think what this kind of means is that if you are good at managing relationships, you're going to be able to manage them in your personal life and your work life. That those skills, those human relation skills, apply in both arenas. And then number 4, certain skills contribute to success in both work and personal life, and human relations is one of those skills. If you have a significant other, I'm sure you've had conflict with them, and if you can manage that conflict at home with them, you probably have decent conflict management skills that you can apply in the workplace as well. If you are not any good at that, right? Like if you aren't good at conflict management, you might end up, aggravating a problem or making it worse, again, both in work and home life. Oh, whoopsie. So, the study of human relations begins with self-understanding. So we need to be able to understand ourselves before we're able to understand others. So a lot of this course is going to be fairly introspective, which means that you're going to be taking a good look at yourself and doing some self-reflection. Some people do really find this challenging. I encourage you to lean into it. If you start feeling upset or start feeling defensive, those are maybe areas that you could explore a little bit further. So I would recommend, approaching this from like giving yourself some grace, giving yourself a safe space to try to explore those things. You might really begin to understand and learn things about yourself that maybe you had been kind of blocking from yourself before. So self-understanding is knowledge about yourself, particularly in regards to mental and emotional aspects. So, we can all look at ourselves and say like, hey, I have black hair, or I have white skin, or I'm 5'5" tall. Those are things that other people can see about us. We can see that about ourselves, but when we're really looking deeper at that self-understanding, we're looking into our minds, okay? We're looking at the mental, we're looking at our emotional beings and exploring those. So that can mean that when we're looking at understanding ourselves and accepting ourselves, it's a really complex idea. I think we all probably struggle with this to some degree. I think we all kind of have, things that we're maybe insecure about or unsure about ourselves, etc. So it can be really complex and difficult to make that attempt at self-understanding. And then lastly, we do make a distinction between the public and the private self. And honestly, you might have multiple public selves, right? I have my own private self that is special to me when I'm all by myself, the things that I like to do by myself, the thoughts that I have when I'm alone, the way I act is different. And then if I compare that to my public self with, let's say, my husband, or my public self with, my mother and father, or my husband's mother and father, or my colleagues at work, or you guys, my students, right? We all have those different public selves, those different masks that we put on when we interact with different people. And those public selves aren't being phony to yourself, right? You need to have different presentations of yourself for different situations, right? So for instance, with my husband, I'll swear up a storm. I swear constantly. He tells me I have such a potty mouth. But with work colleagues or while teaching, sometimes I slip up, but generally, I think it's important to keep that kind of language out of that environment, right? If I'm with my in-laws, I have lots of nieces and nephews on that side. Again, I don't really, drop the F-bombs around the kids, right? So you have those different public and private selves. For another example of a difference between my public and private self, at home, if I have to make a phone call, I'm talking even ordering pizza or having to make a doctor's appointment or something, holy God, I hate picking up the phone and making that call. At work, I have no problem picking up a phone and making care calls to clients or calls to distributors or manufacturers to get more information. So that's a really big difference between my private and my public self. In my private self, I'm kind of painfully shy, but I push through that for my public self. If you would have asked me, would I be standing in front of classrooms and speaking to people and making lectures and stuff like that, that feels really scary to my private self. But my public self is all about it. So you can have really different, that distinction between the two can be really different. So how can we achieve self-understanding? So there's a few ways that we can go about doing this. So one way is that we can acquire valid information about human behavior, i.e. read this textbook, right? So if you have an understanding of how people think and act and a basic knowledge of interpersonal relationships, you might have aha moments where you're like, oh, I do that too. I didn't even realize I was doing a thing that's known about human behavior. That was just my instinct or whatever. So having background information about human behavior will reveal things to yourself about how you act or how you behave. You can also achieve some self-understanding by receiving feedback. So formal feedback comes in the form of like personnel reviews. So maybe your place of business does an annual employee reviews or appraisals where they kind of let you know how you're doing, how you're performing. Informal feedback is, your boss coming up to you at the end of the day being like, that was a really busy day and you handled yourself well. So thank you for that. That's informal feedback. So receiving formal and informal feedback at work helps to contribute to our self-understanding of certainly that work-life persona. You can also get formal and informal feedback in your personal life, right? For instance, I asked my husband the other day, I was like, I feel like my hair looks really beautiful right now. Is this true? Or do I have a different perception of beauty than you? Like, do you think this looks nice, right? So I sought out that feedback from him. And sometimes you need to do that. Ideally, we would like to get that kind of feedback from people that we trust, right? Maybe asking like your sworn enemy if they think you're a nice person isn't the person to ask to get that feedback. Also, I think mothers and fathers can be really biased towards their children, so they might not be the best feedback person either. I feel like if I asked my mom, is there something wrong with me? Am I not doing this well? She'd be like, you're amazing in every way. And it's true. I do that with my kids too. They definitely have things that are whatever, but I'm like, they're amazing and perfect. So sometimes you need to find that person, that friend maybe, or like a work colleague that you're close with that's able to give you that, that feedback that you need to develop a good self-understanding. You can also develop feedback yourself from self-examination quizzes. So we are going to do a little bit of self-examination work today as part of our journal. So filling out these kind of quizzes can be helpful to learn things about yourself. I feel like these are hot right now with social media, and I think people are just at home and bored, so everyone's taking their tests. But I feel like there's so many things that people are talking about online, like, is it enneagrams and the INFJs and all these different like personality type tests, introverts, extroverts, all that kind of stuff. But honestly, those can give you some really good information into your self-understanding. So being able to complete those quizzes and have a closer look, it might make a lot of sense to you. This is pretty characteristic of people with my type of personality to maybe, let's say, avoid conflict or be a people pleaser, that kind of thing. So learning that about yourself from a self-examination quiz certainly does lead to some self-understanding. And then, of course, I'm a huge advocate for therapy. Sometimes it's hard to evaluate ourselves. Sometimes we need to have a safe space and a guide to do that, and therapy might be really helpful, especially if you have any mental health issues that you're dealing with, or childhood traumas, things like that. Counseling can be certainly really helpful for those things. So let's talk about our self-concept. Your self-concept is what you think about yourself. So self-concept can be a little bit tricky. We tend to undervalue our good qualities and overvalue our bad qualities. I think that's kind of human nature, especially in our society. We live in a capitalist society that tells us all these things are wrong with us so that they can sell us products to fix those things, right? So people often end up really struggling with their self-concept, and they don't maybe necessarily have a super accurate view. So what builds our self-concept? What creates that self-concept in our brains? So it's based largely on what others have said about us and their reactions to us. So that's called reflected appraisal. So, you're walking down the street and someone turns around and checks you out. You're like, oh, I must be looking fine today, right? Or maybe you have the reaction of like, oh my God, do I have something in my teeth, right? So other people's reactions can build that self-concept. Understanding ourselves by examining how different we are from others and groups that we join. That's called social comparison. So I think a lot of the time as humans, it is part of our nature to want to fit in with our group. If we are part of a group that we don't fit in with well, that can damage our self-concept. If we are part of a group that's really warm and inviting and we fit well with them and mesh well with them, that's going to improve our self-concept. And then, of course, an important fact is that self-concept does have several components, right? So you might look at yourself, you might have a great self-concept of, let's say, your academic self. So you know that you study well, that you prioritize learning the material you're supposed to learn, you really engage with the material, you know that you are good academically. But you might have a really poor self-concept of yourself when it comes to your non-academic aspects, or maybe your practical aspects, just keeping it strictly about school. So maybe you're really confident about the things you've learned in terms of, let's say, talking to owners about thyroid illness, but you're not confident in your skills, let's say, like a practical skill, maybe like, restraining cats or something. So why do we want to have a strong self-concept? If we have a strong self-concept, we're going to have strong self-confidence. And I think we are sold this bill of goods all the time in like magazines and media that confidence is key. And I think that's really, can be really true, right? We want to have a good self-confidence because we tend to have more trust in ourselves then, right? We tend to be more successful because we believe we can get there, right? People that are self-confident see a challenge and say, I can meet that challenge. Someone that has a poor self-confidence sees a challenge and says, I could never do that, and backs down, okay? So a good self-concept will lead to self-confidence, which we want. So like I said already, self-confidence, people that are self-confident tend to be more successful, and they tend to achieve their goals and achieve higher goals as well. So a contributing factor to positive self-concept and self-confidence may be inherited talents. So sometimes people are just good at things that they try, right? Do you know anyone that's like a golden child? That's kind of my joke name for people that are just good at everything they do, right? My husband has a friend who will be like, oh, a guitar, I've never seen one of these before. Pick it up, start noodling around, and all of a sudden he sounds like, Jimi Hendrix or something. He'll be like, oh, a bike, that's interesting. And they'll start doing like bike tricks on it. And you'll be like, have you done that before? And he's like, no, I'm just goofing around. But he's just good at everything he does, right? Some people have those inherited talents. So certainly those people tend to be more self-confident because they know they've got those skills. But inherited talents aren't everything, because abilities are a big part of life too, right? So you might not have inherited the talent, but maybe you've practiced and you've gotten really good at it. That's an ability you have now, okay? So that can be beneficial as well. You don't necessarily have to be born with it, but if you're able to build that skill, that contributes to self-confidence. And then, of course, feedback as well. We talked about feedback being a part of what builds our self-concept, and that can certainly contribute to self-concept and self-confidence. People that have grown up in an environment where they were really supported by their parents, told that they were doing a good job, that people are proud of them, those people tend to have better self-concepts as they age. Oopsie. So self-esteem is defined as the experience of feeling competent to cope with the challenges in life and being worthy of happiness. So people with a positive self-esteem tend to have a positive overall evaluation of themselves. People with good self-esteem, that self-esteem comes from within, and other people's maybe a negative comment or like an insult tend to just bounce right off those people. People with a positive self-esteem tend to have a positive overall evaluation and therefore develop a positive self-concept. So if you feel good about yourself, you'll think good about yourself too. So that's kind of a difference there. Like self-esteem is how we feel about ourselves, right? And self-concept is what we think about ourselves. So if you feel good about yourself, you'll probably think good about yourself too. So self-esteem has some interrelated components. Self-efficacy, which is the confidence in your ability to carry out a specific task. So if you know you're good at something, you're going to feel confident about it and it's going to build your self-esteem. And then also your self-respect, which is how you think and feel about yourself, right? So people that tend to have low self-respect tend to have low self-esteem as well. So we talked a little about this already. Self-esteem develops from a lot of early life experiences. I'm not sure if we've talked about this yet, but in vet medicine, mental illness tends to be overrepresented among the professionals in this field. And one of those reasons is because the professionals in our field tend to have higher occurrences of ACEs, which are adverse childhood events. Adverse childhood events can be things like abuse, or like an imprisoned family member, a death in the family, or like absent parents, things like that. So in those situations, typically we don't get those good self-esteem developing things like compliments and praise, affection in the form of like hugs, or people saying they're proud of you. And you might not have had a lot of opportunities to accomplish worthwhile activities. Those kind of things really help to build self-confidence. So maybe you had a family that maybe didn't have a lot of access to extra money to be able to put you into those, extracurricular activities or something. Being able to achieve those good things in like your karate class or soccer or your piano lessons, those help to build self-esteem. If you didn't get a chance to do those as a kid, you might be kind of missing some of those, right? The fortunate thing for us, though, is that self-esteem remains a lifelong process. So you can always work and build on your self-esteem. Even if your entire childhood was garbage, we can really work on building those things. Getting that compliments or praise from somewhere else, feeling that affection for ourselves and getting it from others. And if we can accomplish worthwhile activities on the job, attending school, right? Those things feel good. How many of you feel great after getting a good mark on an assignment you put a lot of work on, getting some good feedback? It feels nice, right? And it builds our self-esteem. So fortunately for us, self-esteem is that lifelong process that we can keep working on. So what are some consequences of positive self-esteem? We tend to think of consequences as being negative things, but in this case, we're talking about good things about self-esteem. So if we have good self-esteem, it tends to contribute to good mental health. We don't fall apart when someone gives us, maybe some negative feedback or says something nasty about us. We don't totally fall apart. So that is certainly a good thing. We tend to have favorable work performance and attitudes. So positive self-esteem, usually those people have a positive outlook on life and stay pretty upbeat at work. Positive self-esteem is going to relate to achieving your goals. This is focused on work, but it translates to personal life as well. Being able to cope with the challenges of a changing work environment. This is pretty key in the vet hospital. Day to day, you might have different things. You might have emergencies coming in. It might be busy one day, slow the next. So certainly positive self-esteem is going to help you to deal with those challenges. I'm just going to stop saying positive self-esteem here. If you have good positive self-esteem, you tend to be more creative, more innovative, because you believe in your ideas and you're willing to explore them a little bit. People with poor self-esteem tend to not want to try because they're afraid they'll fail. You tend to take responsibility and initiative to resolve issues, right? People with poor self-esteem are afraid to get the negative feedback if they bring something up that's bothering them. So they don't want to say something. They're approaching it from a defensive position because they think that they're going to be in the wrong. These people trust their own capabilities. If you have good self-esteem, you believe in yourself and you know what you're capable of. You can work independently and cooperatively. So both those skills are really important in the vet clinic. Working independently, you need to stay motivated because you're not always going to have someone breathing down your neck telling you to do your job. But you also need to be able to work as part of a team because the hospital is a team environment. And then good self-esteem contributes to a company's competitive edge. So what if your self-esteem is less than perfect? What if you feel like you have poor self-esteem or you are not very confident in yourself? So fortunately, there are things that we can do to enhance our self-esteem. And one of them is to achieve legitimate accomplishments. So one of those things you guys are in right now, and that's school. Being able to complete a school program can really enhance your self-esteem. I did something hard and I completed it and I did well at it. I feel good about my knowledge. I feel good about my accomplishment. That's going to build your self-esteem. So congratulations, you guys are already on one step towards improving self-esteem. You can continue to develop and appreciate your strengths and accomplishments, right? So continuing education, I find, is always so motivating. I feel so good after I learn something new, so that can certainly help you. Appreciating your strengths. If there's something you know you're really good at, embrace it. Make that your specialty at work, right? Maybe you love talking about nutrition. Be the one that people come to with their nutrition questions, right? Build those strengths, build that knowledge so that you can become more accomplished and more self-confident in that area. And then if there are areas that make you feel really incompetent or that you're just plain not good at, see if you can minimize those. So there are things that maybe you're just not good at, you're not interested in learning it, you don't want to do it. That's kind of like me in basically any sports. Like, I'm really uncoordinated. I feel like I'm terrible at all sports. I'm fine with that. I just don't play them, right? But if I was in a situation where there was maybe something I wasn't very good at, but it was important to my role, I would probably want to try to make that an accomplishment. I'd want to learn about that thing. So if there's an area that I feel like I'm poor in at work, I tend to take that as my next challenge. That's what I would like to learn more about so that I can, build my self-esteem and confidence in that area. Surrounding ourselves with people that have good self-esteem themselves are going to boost your self-esteem. People that are positive influences in your life that aren't total energy sucks, those are the people you want to spend time with. You don't want necessarily people that just spend the whole time telling you how amazing you are. That can feel really hollow sometimes. But the people that recognize the good parts about you and boost you up, those are the people you want to spend time with. And then on the flip side of that, try to limit those energy suck people if you can. Sometimes it's hard to do. Maybe it's like your mother or your father or something. It's hard to cut those kind of people out of our lives. But in that case, it might be a good idea to start exercising some healthy boundaries with them too. Have you ever heard of like fake it till you make it? Modeling the behavior of people with high self-esteem can help you to feel more self-esteem. Maybe you've done this, like maybe you're like really miserable, but you decide to fake a smile. And over time, eventually that smile becomes real. Same idea here. You might not feel confident, but fake it. Very first day that I ever taught in front of a classroom, I felt like I was going to throw up. I was so nervous, but I faked it that I was like, oh yeah, old hat, done this a million times. And that self-esteem gap filled in. So I was able to get better and better as I went along just by kind of faking it, right? So if you set the bar high, you'll tend to try to meet it, right? And then we want to be careful to avoid any unrealistic sense of yourself where you have like an inflated or like an ego kind of thing, right? We don't want to get to the point where we think we are the best and we can't do any wrong. How dare anyone criticize us because we are, beyond reproach. That's just not true. There's always room for improvement, okay? So there's always things that we can be doing to better our sense of self. We don't want to get to that ego place where we think that we're, infallible. And honestly, that tends to really damage your self-esteem too, because if you think you are like all that and then something happens to like knock you off your pedestal kind of thing, you really take that personally. That's going to be a real dip to your self-esteem. So why then are we going to be why do we want to achieve an understanding of human relations? So what is this going to do for us? Why are we studying this course as part of our VOA or VOTA program? So if we acquire valid information about human behavior, it's going to help us make others feel comfortable. It's going to help us feel comfortable, and we'll make favorable impressions on and off the job. So that means we can interact with clients in a way that makes them feel excited about coming back to the hospital, as opposed to feeling nervous that they're going to be berated or something. It makes us more approachable. We're able to help our clients better if we have a good understanding of human relations. It's also going to help us develop skills in dealing with people. So that includes good communication, essential in the workplace, both with clients and coworkers. It'll help us to resolve conflict, again, essential with clients and sometimes coworkers. And we would like to relate well with diverse groups of people and act confidently when we are around other people. So diversity is super important. We live in such a melting pot of a country in Canada. All different types of people live here. All different types of people we'll be interacting with. So if we can relate well with everyone and understand that human relations from all sides, we are going to perform better at our job. Having a good understanding of human relations and a good understanding of our self-concept and all that is going to help with job issues. So maybe you have a conflict at work, maybe you are feeling overworked or underworked. Having this understanding is going to help you to solve that problem with less inner turmoil. So inner turmoil is that sitting and worrying and feeling really upset about an issue. Having that understanding of human relations is going to give you the ability to just deal with the issue and move on. It'll help us to cope with our personal problems more effectively and help us to capitalize on opportunities. Remember, we talked about people with good self-esteem see an opportunity and take it. They see a challenge and they take it. People with a bit of a poor self-concept, they might overlook those opportunities as being something that's out of their reach. And then lastly, I've got this little diagram here of the Johari window. You can read more about this in your textbook, but basically this is a way at looking at ourselves and getting and giving feedback to others. So you can see in this first window, it's the open area. So this window right here. The open area is open knowledge. That means that other people know it about us and we know it about us. So that might be things like what we look like. If you have the sense of vision, you can see other people, right? You know those things about the person. You might have an understanding about how they communicate, because if they've spoken to you, you can say, oh, they're very well spoken. They seem really nervous. They're stammering a lot, or maybe they're very shy and they don't talk at all. Those are things that we'll know about other people by interacting with them. And then we have, as we move down here, the unknown to others area is the hidden area. So the hidden area is things that you know about yourself, but that's hidden by from others, okay? So maybe that's something like a coping mechanism you like to use that you don't want to share with other people. Maybe it's, I'm trying to think of examples here. In your textbook, they give an example of a person who works and doesn't want to tell their coworkers that they brainstorm better without the coworkers, because they don't want the coworkers to know that they think that they're obnoxious. So that's maybe something that you want to keep hidden from other people, right? You know it about yourself, but you don't want to share that with other people. So as we go like down here, the more feedback we give to others, the more things we share, the less of a hidden area we have and the more of an open area we have. And that's how we build deeper relationships with people. And that makes sense, right? If I walk up to like a cashier at the grocery store, they're going to know things about me that are in my open area. They're going to know what I look like, how I talk, whatever. Maybe they know how many kids I have, maybe because I have my kids with me, etc. But they don't really know anything about me that's in that hidden area. On the flip side of that, my husband, he knows a lot about me. A lot of things that nobody else knows, right? So that hidden area is a lot smaller with my husband than it is with like a coworker or someone I meet on the street, right? So the smaller the hidden area with an individual, the deeper your relationship with them is. And then we have under here the unknown to self area, but that's known to others, is our blind area. So the blind area are things that other people see about us that we might not know about ourselves. So one common example, it's given in your textbook too, is our level of attractiveness. So lots of us, again, little capitalism rant here, but we live in a capitalist society that tells us how terrible we are and what we need to do to get better, and then sell us the products to try to make ourselves better. So lots of us have a skewed view of how attractive we might be to other people, but other people will know that about us, right? So this blind area are things that other people see that we don't see. Maybe we don't think that we are very generous, but other people think we are, that kind of thing. And then lastly, we have our unknown area where we don't know about it and other people don't know about it. This might be an area that you just haven't been challenged in yet. Maybe you have like an emergency situation or something that sparks, that you get this knowledge from. So you might not know how you would do in an emergency because you've never been in an emergency. No one else is going to know how you'd be in an emergency either because they don't know. They've never seen you in it. So that's kind of an example of that unknown area. So the ways that we can shrink this blind area is by soliciting feedback. So we can ask others, people that we trust, to help us to see the things that we don't see about ourselves, so that we can learn more about us and kind of shrink that blind area as well. This way we can learn more, do that self-understanding, build our self-concept, and build our self-esteem as well. So that covers everything for the PowerPoint here for your first chapter. So if you haven't read through the first chapter yet, please do so. And then we will do, here, I'm going to get out of this, and I'm going to show you what our challenge is for today. So for our reflective journal, our journal prompt for today is thus. We are completing the Human Relations Self-Assessment Quiz 1-3. So that's in my 11th edition textbook, but I'm not sure if it'll be in your 4th edition. So I did copy it out here just in case you did not have access to it. So what we're completing today is a written self-portrait. So a good starting point in acquiring serious self-knowledge is to prepare a written self-portrait in the major life spheres or aspects. In each of the following spheres, describe yourself in 25 to 50 words, or however many you need. If you need more than that, go beyond 50. And then it gives you an example. So for the interpersonal sphere, a person might write, I'm a little timid on the surface, but the people that get to know me understand I'm filled with enthusiasm and joy. My relationships with people last a long time. I'm on excellent terms with all members of my family, and my significant other and I have been together for 5 years. We're very close emotionally and should be together for a lifetime. So that's an example, that's an example of the interpersonal. So you can have a look and see occupational and or school, right? So you can talk about what you are like at school or in your job. How would you describe yourself in that area? You can talk about your interpersonal, which is your interactions with other people. You could talk about your beliefs, your values, and your attitudes. And then the last one is your physical description. So body type, appearance, grooming, etc. So this is our journal prompt for today. So you can just open up a Word document, make a title page so I know who's submitting this, and then go ahead, pop the date at the top of the page and start typing away. So I would like you to fill out all 4 of these, do a little written self-portrait of you for each of those 4 spheres. And if there's any other spheres that you feel like you'd like to reflect on, I encourage you to include those as well. So journal prompts like this aren't, correct or incorrect. They're just your thoughts and your opinions. So I encourage you to take this time to delve deep, try to see yourself for what you are, and try to really get in touch with that self-concept. So if you do have any questions, do please ask me in the virtual classroom, ask me in the chat, or send me an email. Thanks so much for listening to this lecture, and we'll see you in the virtual classroom. Bye.